Hello and welcome to Shy Talk, an Irish history podcast. My name's Kevin Larney and here this week we're back, the two of us, back together in the same digital room.
Are you going to say my name or are you just...
I'm going to let you say your own name. That's I think...
Yeah, but you can't... You can't...
Right. I can never pronounce it right.
It's called...
throws me off. And the umlaut right back to back with each other.
It's simply pronounced God.
I thought it was Jode.
Ah, yes, because I'm wider than I am long.
Yes.
Yes, hello. It's Jason Brennan here for the intro this week. I wasn't around last week because I was working. I'm sorry, Kevin. I didn't like how you called me out on that on the intro because I listened to it. I was like, I mean, he's got a point.
I bigged you up. I said you're off doing your big filming stuff.
That's fair. Actually, we did have one of our listeners this week got on to me, and he goes by the name of Sylvis Robertson. He'd reached out to me. He didn't realize he'd been living in Austin in film production and didn't realize that that's where I was and what I also did. He's moved away now, but a shout out to Sylvis. Who's our other shout out this week?
And also a shout out to Daniel Burke, who emailed us this week too. I don't know if you saw this, Jason, but he informed us that when
that
Michael
I was
Collins
correct,
was over in...
That I was right? That is that what...
You were accidentally correct. Apparently
that's
when Michael...
still... What was the word that sentence ended with? What was the... It sounded like a
You can't spell incorrect without correct. But so apparently when Collins was over in London signing the treaty, Dev was hiding out in the Strand Hotel in Limerick, awaiting news on the treaty, apparently within a couple of 100 metres from the original treaty stone. So in a way, you were right when you said Limerick was known as the treaty county because that's where Dev hid out while waiting for the treaty. So, you're nodding along now saying yes, as if you had any idea that any of this was true.
No, that's exactly what I was doing. And Clare's the Banner County, Carlow were the Scallion Eaters. I know.
Why is Clare the Banner County? The Dev go and wave a banner there in St. Patrick's Day Parade 1963. But well, thanks for the information, Daniel Burke, and also thanks for the cash money that he sent us on buymeacoffee.com. You too, dear listener, can go to www.buymeacoffee.com. I feel like there was one too many W's in there, but you get the idea. And you can send us some money to keep this show afloat. But that's it. I don't think we have any other...
Yeah, just the regular get in touch with us, all of that nice stuff. But also, cheers for everyone again for helping us break our listenership record.
Yeah, thanks to all you doing the real legwork at home. We've been consistently in the top 20. I keep trying to say the top 20 charts, but it's really
it's
top
25.
Not within the top 20, but within the top 20 to 30 brackets, which is in a way, the top 20, but not in the way that you're thinking of.
Yeah, we're in the top 30 for sure. We're in the top 25 by my calculations. By your calculations, which I believe are correct, and I just lie. I just add a zero to everything.
Yeah, we're in the top 300. But I think the real accolade was the last time I checked it, we were on all podcasts in Ireland, every podcast, every genre that's listened to, we were one behind Golf Weekly.
Yes, which did...
That's the one to beat.
I've produced or I've edited whatever some of that show before when I used to work in News Talk, and I was like, it's not important, but I really did just want to beat that one.
Yeah,
it cuts deep. It really does.
Yeah. So Golf Weekly, we're coming for you. Watch out.
No, we're coming specifically for Peter Crouch's podcast. That's the one.
Oh yeah, the Crouch. Why? How has Peter Crouch got a podcast?
It's massive. Much like him, it's huge.
It is doing very well.
Yeah,
but
he's good. He's good. You know what he is, Kev? He's banter.
He's one of the 7 footballers that I know, and I can't remember why.
Because he's 6'7".
Yeah, but is he? He doesn't play currently.
No, he doesn't play anymore. But he hasn't really played. He's retired, I believe now. But he's also basically been retired for about 5 or 6 years. But every one team in the Premier League will be like, "Here, give him a year. He's 6'7". We'll throw him on for a couple of games at some point." Yeah. But he's great because he has those famous lines that are, real comedy. Like, "Hey, Peter, what would you be if you weren't a professional footballer?" A virgin. That's
pretty good.
It is pretty
actually.
good. It is, and that's why I like.
Yeah.
As soon as I say it, I'm like, it's whatever humor like that. No, that's pretty good, especially for a footballer. That's
Right. Well, that's all that needed to be said, I think. So, Jason, here's this week's episode, all about Kit Cavanagh / Kit Welch, Kit Walsh, Kit Davis, Mother Ross, the woman herself. Let's get into it.
Gather around now, you're in for a story. Old tales of lore, all in search of a glory. The history and mystery of lads, lasses and all. Discoveries and voyages, the rise and the fall. Follow me now as we go back in time. We trace the steps of Irish lineage to find. Joseph from Carlisle and Cavan Dog guide you through the ways of Shine's Fall.
The year was 2017, and I met a man from Iran whose name was Islam. And I remember thinking, that's a bit extreme.
I think you're going to make a limerick.
Is it? Well, he wasn't from Limerick. He was from Kuwait originally. But I remember he introduced himself as Islam, and I was like, I obviously didn't say this to him, but in my head I was like, ooh, that's a bit mad, like Islam. Imagine naming your child Islam. That's a bit out there, bit extreme. And then I remember that Christian is a very common name in the Western world.
Yeah, like what I have a good friend called Christian, and I never think about the atrocities that his religion.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I'm sure. There's been many a Muslim man has met someone called Christian and thought, ooh, bit weird, bit of an odd one. Remember the KKK? Remember the Crusades? Bit much. In 1667, Christian Cavanagh was born in Dublin, the daughter of a maltster, who is someone who makes malt for breweries. She went by Kit. Kit was her nickname. She's got a lot of names in this thing, so I'm probably going to flip between a lot of them, but we'll go for Kit.
She was a robotic car.
Yes. So Kit spent a lot of time on the family farm in Leixlip. She described herself as a masculine child, spent a lot of time working the land, breaking in horses. Her family was Protestant, but and you're going to enjoy this, Jason, when King James II came over, and we're back into the King James stuff. I hope you're paying attention for those 6 episodes of
Who was he again?
War of the Two Kings, because
what was he?
He was a man, it doesn't matter. Go back and listen to episode 32 of Shite Talk, I don't know. But King James's men started roaming the country, rallying people to join the Jacobite cause. And even though her family was Protestant, so her father was Protestant, and James was representing the Catholic side, he still joined up, apparently from a consciousness of its being a duty incumbent on him to support his lawful sovereign, notwithstanding his being of a different religion, which he thought no sufficient reason to affect his loyalty.
And in words that I'd understand?
I guess, even though it was against his own self-interest, he believed in the monarchy so much that he went and fought to preserve a monarch who would then strip him of his lands and such if he won.
A lot more morals and beliefs back then. And people would stick to them. Like, I don't...
Yeah, I mean...
No, not for me.
I mean, so like he sells all of his stuff and leaves his wife and kids behind to go and fight with this guy he's never met, who's a king of another country. And if he wins, it means he'll lose everything.
Yeah, it sounds like he's in an unhappy marriage to me. That's the...
Well, there was another bit that I cut out of this that said like he only saw his wife once every week on a Sunday, unless there was an emergency.
Just to get the roast.
He worked somewhere else.
Yeah, no, to be honest now, that sounds like... That, to me, initially... That sounds like a man who's very unhappy in his life and just wants any excuse to get away.
Yeah. What's that? There's a cause coming? Well, now, if he does win, you'll lose everything you've ever earned. Doesn't matter. Where are we going? Away from here? Give me a horse. Let's go.
It's 100% against all of your beliefs. No, I have to go. You don't understand. It'll mean that you lose your wife and children.
It's for the king or the president or the Deutschmark or the Kaiser or whatever the hell. Just come on, let's go.
I wonder how many men in Ireland did that before divorce was legalized.
I think this was your options back then. Just go get killed at the Battle of the Boyne. So one Sunday while he was off fighting for the Jacobites, some of the local Catholics boarded up the Protestant church in Leixlip while Kit's mother was still inside at Mass, And when Kit heard the news, she grabbed a spit and ran down to help her mother out. A sergeant tried to stop her getting into the church, so she stabbed him in the leg.
Nice. Now, what's a spit? Is it some kind of a spade or some kind of a fork?
No, I think it's like a fire, like a spit for the fire.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, spitfire.
Yeah, so I guess something you could skewer meat with. So something that you could stab a leg with, I guess. Kit was arrested for causing a ruckus, but she was acquitted partially after she pointed out that her dad was all fighting for the Catholic side. So, back off.
Yeah.
She would have been around 22 or 23 at the time.
That's her, but it's the local police that, but no, he's fighting for the Catholic side of things. But
so the Jacobite side is the Catholic side, but then like Catholic and Protestant tensions are high. So while he's off like on the other side of the country fighting, and meanwhile back in Leixlip, the Catholics board up the Protestant church, ignoring the fact that like his family is Protestant, so they're attending Protestant mass.
But isn't the police force surely Protestant?
No, the police force is Catholic at this time.
I don't know.
So at this time, like this is when Dick Talbot is in charge of Ireland, and most of the police force, the judicial force, the army is all Catholic. So at this time, very much the police would have come down and been like, "What are you doing? Locking up the Protestant church while there's people inside?"
Oh yeah, seems about right.
All's in order here.
This is ridiculous. I can't believe you've done such a thing. Where is your fire already on hand? What's the
Yes.
Where are your archers with gasoline? I don't understand. What's happening?
There's not nearly enough kindling to burn this church down. Come on. So after the Jacobites are defeated at the Battle of the Boyne, she said her father showed up in the middle of the night with a French officer and they took refuge in the house. But when they heard the advancing army of King William, he basically told his wife to forget all about him. Go on living as a free Protestant with the kids and, good luck to you. And then himself and the French officer ran off into the middle of the night.
Yeah, he's like, hey, listen, I'm not going to see you anymore. You go raise our kids elsewhere. I'm going to run off in the night with this handsome Frenchman. You'll never see me again, baby.
Well, so this is already his chickens coming home to roost for like siding with Jack. So because his wife is Protestant, she's one of the few people in the country that's now fine after like James has been defeated. But because he's been fighting for the Jacobite side, he is basically on the run. He ran off and then they went on to fight with James again. He was shot and wounded in the Battle of Ogram the following year in 1691, but apparently he was stitched up and making a recovery when one of his own troops, a guy named Kelly, ran off with his horse in the night to join de Ginkle's army and left Kit's dad to die from his wounds.
See, when you had said stitched up, I was like, who planted the evidence? I was like, oh no, he's been shot.
Well, it seems like he was stitched up. I mean, what a thing to do. He just stole the guy's horses and left him there to die. I'm guessing at this time, he probably had like a paper cut and would have survived, except that he was left alone in a field.
But isn't that to say it like a stitch in time saves me from having to rob the horse of a healthy man?
Exactly. So, yeah, even though Kit's family was Protestant, because her father had fought for the Catholic James side, they had a lot of their property confiscated and a lot of their wealth taken by the new Irish government after the war was done. So, not good. In her early 20s, Kit became involved with her mother's first cousin, Thomas Howell.
Involved?
And they courted.
Yes, so...
Yes.
Okay, yeah, just making sure, because, sometimes when I'm researching these things and writing them down, I'll be like, oh, involved with, and then just, you'll fail to remember that, like, a lot of it's winking, nodding back then, that it's...
how she described it was, he made warm love to me.
I don't know how I feel about that.
I don't feel good about that.
No, why is there a temperature involved?
I don't know, but it's not as explicitly sexual as we think of like making love now. I think it just means they were affectionate.
No, I think he would only have sex inside of a sauna. But he would caress at the same time. It wasn't particularly aggressive. It was quite sensual. It was just, he was a very big fan of the heat. He didn't like the tepid climate of Ireland.
But he was cracking on to her. I mean, I guess the fact that they're cousins, no one cares. But he was cracking on.
Yeah, but come on. I mean, Kevin, give us a leeway. It's only first cousins.
It's only first cousins, which I think is probably the worst genetically. But
first is the worst, second is the best, third is the one where you grab their breast. I'm pretty sure.
I think that's true. But he was cracking on to her for about 2 years, but As she had no money after the war, all she had was the useless gun money from James II. And Howell had no prospects. She was reluctant to marry him. He was persistent though, and he showed up at the house often to try and woo her. And one day he showed up and it was just her there. She was busy making the beds, and he threw himself at her feet and pleaded and begged, and eventually, as she said, with little resistance on my side, he threw me on the bed and deprived me of that intestable jewel which a maiden ought to preserve, preferable to life.
Oh, okay. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
I, as an Irish stand-up comedian,
yes,
I think I can read between the lines here, or as a comedian in general. He's getting Me Too'd.
There's kind of more, like, she wrote more about it than
how can he
basically...
Hold on. How can he be throwing himself at her feet and begging her, and at the same time then...
He finds her alone and basically, like...
Pressures her into so he's...
sex. But so, like, with little resistance. I mean, she regrets it afterwards. I think at the time...
Does he gives her the old Aziz. He gives her the Ansari.
Yes, exactly. He gives her the Ansari special.
Extra hot.
So this is where they make warm love, maybe too warm. He fled the scene shortly after, and she spent the day freaking out about what happened. She spirals a bit into depression, and after a while, she asks her mother if she can leave the house. And so Kit ends up moving to her aunt's pub in Dublin.
Okay, what's the pub?
I don't know, actually. There's a lot of pubs in this story, but none of them are mentioned by name, so I guess none of them survived.
Oh, so yeah, like, and you've also given me a lot of, I believe, pertinent information about the story so far, and I've been like, okay, yeah, for sure.
Honestly,
and then,
not really.
And then she went to a pub. What pub? Where is it? What was the name?
But honestly, no. I realized we're a bit into the story. Pretty much all that's happened so far is that her dad foolishly went and fought for the Jacobite cause. He lost. The family lost everything. Kit slept with her cousin. She regrets it, and now she's moved to Dublin to start afresh.
Okay, so it's
the story of every Carlow man.
I was going to just be base and crass and be like, oh, so it's like they're from Dundalk, so, and I was like, do you know what? I'll leave it go. I won't say it.
Well, I could see it in your eyes, so she gives Howell the cold shoulder, and eventually gets the picture and leaves her alone. And over time, she gets back to her old self. She works with her aunt for a few years, learning the tricks of the trade.
She gives him the cold shoulder, won't talk to him. Is that how you get a cousin that's removed?
Yeah. She gave him the cold shoulder, and then he went from being her first cousin to being her first cousin once removed.
Yeah. We don't talk about that cousin.
So she picks up the tricks of the pub trade, and when her aunt dies, she leaves everything to Kit. So Kit's flying high now.
The whole kit and caboodle.
I'm really hoping there'll be a lot of Kit jokes in here, because it's a prime name for puns. But Kit's flying high now. The owner of a pub, she's got a horse, she's got cash coming into claw, she's answering to no one, and she's the envy of her peers. Soon after taking over the pub, she falls in love with one of the servants there, a Richard Welsh, also sometimes spelled Walsh, but I think it's Welsh with an E.
Okay.
Not really important.
You say that with the knowledge we're going to have about 50 Walshes or Welshes given out to us in our DMs this week.
As a Welsh, I have never been more disgusted to be associated with the Walsh family.
Those dirty Walshes.
She resisted at first, thinking that she was unfit for marriage because of Howell, and then reasoning that it would be unseemly for her to marry someone who worked in her pub. But as she said, love and reason seldom agree, and once that despotic tyrant gets possession of the heart, he will also rule the head. That's pretty good.
That is very good. Like we've had a couple of stories recently about fantastic female writers. Like if she's same as Peg Plunkett. I can't write as well as that now, and I've had an actual education and a degree based within English.
So eventually, she decides to marry him, but she still thinks it's improper to ask him directly because, you know, she's a woman, he's a man. So she had her friend bring up the topic with him, which I get is like the 1680s version of "Will you shift my mate?"
Yeah, that's amazing. They had to go to a disco beforehand.
Yeah, and she, got her friend basically to go over and be like, "Are you frigid, Richard?"
Kit said she'd let you finger her. She'll meet you out around the back beside that high ace fan in about 20 minutes. No, not the red one, the blue one.
This whole passage is great. She gets her mate to like ask, or to like egg Richard on to like ask her to marry her. So Richard follows the friend's advice and he asks Kit, and she said, this is true romance. She says, "You should mind the business of the house as you ought to do, and you'd find a cure for this pretend passion, which was the common effect of idleness."
Basically, wait, hold on. So she's after telling her friend to go get him to propose, and then when he goes and does it, she turns around and goes, "You're a lazy bollocks. You need to fucking do more around the house, you piece of shit."
She basically says, "Get back to work."
Wow. Although that's like, some people might think that that's weird. I believe that's what a French woman would do. And also, I think we all know how much I love French women, Kevin.
Yes. Well, yeah, so we'll get into this later on, but like this is all coming from a book which is essentially her autobiography. And there's a whole passage that goes back and forth like this, where she says stuff like, "If you ever talk to me like this again, I'll have you flogged. But secretly, I was delighted that he'd spoken to me." And like, so it's written like well after the fact, so it's probably a bit dramatized, but that seems even worse somehow, because that's like everything she says to him, she's like, "Don't you ever talk to me like that again. You're my subordinate and I won't have it." And then everything she's writing herself would be like, "Dear diary, Richard proposed to me again today. I'm so in love with him." So it's really just enforcing this, like, whenever a woman says no, she's just being coy, and you should just never take no for an answer.
Well,
which is,
to be fair, that's what her cousin thought.
Yeah, well, this we're seeing the ramifications of this. Well, like it's not a great message to be teaching people, but so then in an act of theatre,
but it's still a thing today. Like that's still a thing today. Do you know how many I don't want to say how many times, but like it's for sure happened to be where you're seeing someone. It starts out with going, "This is amazing because neither of us are in a place where we want a relationship or anything serious. Let's just hang out as friends." And then you get close to them, and then after a couple of weeks, they're kind of like, "So, what's happening now? Are we going to go to the next level? Are we going to like just say it up front early? Be honest with people," is what I'm saying, Kevin.
Yeah. But I like to think we've at least gotten this. I think we're sort of edging towards open honesty between men and women. No, I like to think we've gotten beyond the stage.
We're getting nowhere near it, or else I wouldn't still be getting over a heartbreak from last December.
Have we at least gotten past the stage where a girl would be like, "Here, man, will you shift my mate?" And then you go up to her mate and she says, "If you ever talk to me like that again, I will have you arrested."
That's exactly how I had my heart broken.
But I would not have done well in these times. Like she's basically like had sex once, and then we talked about it a bit in like the Peg Plunkett episode. She gives in and has sex once, and then basically has to like uproot her life and move to avoid the shame of it.
So in that sense, it's not changed at all throughout the generations.
No.
Did you see? Now. Tell me this: did you see that WhatsApp message that went around the weekend of the Mayo football team?
I did.
I saw one about a county championship. I'm not sure if it was like A or B or junior or whatever, but football over in Mayo, and the local team won. One of the lads went home. He had sex with this girl. Took a photo of her the next morning. I guess maybe she's asleep, but it was of her arse and the cup that they had just won, sent it into the group chat. Now, thankfully, as you know, on WhatsApp, those things are never forwarded to multiple other group chats. So you'd never have to worry about her da finding that photo, not realising that it was his own daughter's arse, and then taking the photo and forwarding it into a referees association group in Ireland. Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I feel like that's probably, I don't know if that's a suiting punishment.
Well, that's as soon as I saw it, I was
forwarding pictures of people, but it's karmatic in some way.
Yeah, I was telling somebody else about it like just afterwards, and I was like, and the poor man, he'll never be able to look his daughter in the. I was like, hold on a second, this man is just taking random naked photos of girls and showing them off to multiple groups of older men in a WhatsApp group. Like,
yeah,
that's what he gets. That's like, he's like, my daughter's photo shouldn't have been taken like this and spread around everywhere. You're the dude doing that seemingly all of the time. So
fair. Yeah.
If every and here's me on my high horse. Every dude ever, if you don't want photos of your girlfriend or your sister or daughters or mother sent around like without their knowledge, don't do it in your daily life as well to all of your friends.
That's more than fair. So in in a final act of theatre, she gets her friend to like publicly appeal to her reason. Be like, come on, Kit, give in to this Richard guy. He's not so bad. And then she reluctantly relents, and they get married within 2 weeks, even though she was the one who set off this whole chain of events.
And it's what she really wanted.
It is what she really wanted. But so they're happy out living together, Jason. She's running the pub, and he's working now as the master of the pub. Over the next 4 years, they have 2 boys, and Kit is pregnant with their 3rd kid, when one day in 1692, Richard went out to pay a supplier and disappeared without a trace.
He went out to get some cigarettes.
He did the 1692, went out to get some cigarettes, and was never seen from again.
What is it?
We've got ourselves a mystery.
What is it about going to buy fags that when you get there, you start smoking, and then you're just like, do you know what I should have done instead of this? Abandon my family.
Why? What's the crossover there? It's never I went out for milk and then never came back.
No, it's not. Yeah, I don't know. Let's stop tarring them all with the one brush. There's enough tar in the cigarettes.
It's a cliche that seems to come from a time when everyone smoked. I guess it was something you could be like, no, it's conceivably, I need to go to the shopping.
I think it's a cliche from a time when everyone used to abandon their families.
They're the 2 hottest pastimes on the go. So Kit went out to the supplier, who confirmed that Richard had been there to pay his bill, and then he left with some other man that the supplier didn't know. The Kit spent months searching for him everywhere, but there was no sign of him. She became convinced that the man the supplier had seen Richard with had murdered him. Then one day, a year after Richard had disappeared, she received a letter from, drumroll please, Richard. That's the suitable response. Explaining how, on the day he went missing from Dublin, he bumped into an old school friend and proceeded to get blind drunk, and then woke up in Holland. So, and this is like a year later at this stage.
Hey, look, it happens, man. Like, these things happen. You need to give someone the leeway.
Well, apparently, right. So in the letter, he says that himself and a friend had gone drinking in a tavern. That's the guy who was at the supplier with him. They continued on to a ship that was bringing recruits to the Netherlands. And by the time he sobered up, he realized that they'd landed in Hilversluis in Holland. And now he was stuck there with no money, no Dutch, and no contacts other than his mate from Dublin. And his mate convinced him that the best course of action was to join up with the regiment, to fight against the French, and then get enough money to make it back home. But of course, like, once you enlist, you can't really desert. So he just has to ride out the rest of the war and hope that they win and that he survives. And you might remember this war from the War of the Two Kings episode. This is a war that'll be known as the 9-Year War. So he's in it.
How many years are we into it at this stage?
None. This is day 1, like.
Oh, no.
Well, actually, he signed up around day 1, so this is about a year into it.
Oh, that's a tough one.
We've all been there. He went out for a couple of pints.
And then Dublin goes into lockdown.
Yeah. He's accidentally signed up to fight for King William against the French.
Right. It's not adding up. There's no way that or does it? Can you wake up drunk in Holland? I feel like transport. Well, if you keep, because
I guess when he's on the boat, I guess they keep like feeding him drink.
Why though?
It is a long enough trip.
It's a good few. Yeah, no, man, like just shipping off to Holland. Hey, it's that'd be a long enough old spin. I feel like you're looking at 10 hours, 20. I don't know how ships move. I know it's on water somehow.
I guess it's possible. I don't know. They must have been drinking on the ship over, but
Well, I did. So my friends, when I was in Vietnam the other year, I split up with them for a few days. But my friends Janine and Kira went to some small town somewhere. I went to another place. I forget the name of them. But they'd run into some British fella. He'd been telling them that he went to Ibiza and then ended up the next day in Hanoi in Vietnam. Because he had gotten so drunk, he went to the airport with his passport and ended up in a new country. And then he'd just been travelling then for a few months. Funnily enough, my friend Janine did shift him, or make out with him for our American listeners. because she was like, oh, he's such a nice fella. You know, he was talking about like, he kept saying about how it's ridiculous how there's no public services in England for all of the people of colour in waiting lines for the NHS. And then we had to explain to her that my friend Kira had actually heard what he had said, and he was like, oh, these fucking foreigners with their sniffles taking up the lines there at the NHS. Yeah, it was. Oh. Yeah, it was like I've never had that like shattering illusion of like, oh, I've just shifted a racist, but
this, I think your friend Kira, I don't know, your friend Kira and Shattering Illusions, that just reminds me of, we were doing one of the gigs in Edinburgh, and I was doing the crowd work, you know, doing good crowd work, a bit of where you from, what's your job, how's that going? And then I made fun of some woman or something who was sitting near the front, and she kind of looked a bit sad. Like she didn't, it didn't land too well with her, so I moved on. And then after the show, when we were at the back doing like the bucket thing and shaking everyone's hand, when she was coming out, I was like, sorry if I went a bit hard there or whatever. Hope you're all right. And she was like, that's the most anyone's made fun of me since my dad died. And I took that to be like, you know, something like when someone dies, you just want a sense of normality, and you're sick of people walking on eggshells around you, and you just want to feel normal again a little bit. Like you just want people to treat you like a human being. And I took it to mean like, thank you. You've done to me what no one will do to me now. Everyone's treating me like wrapped in bubble wrap or whatever. Yeah. And she walked off. And then your friend Kira turned to me and was like, Jesus Christ, how mean were people to her at her dad's funeral?
It sounded like a
fully serious. Be like, Jesus, why were they so mean to her at the fucking going up and giving eulogies? Like, he was, the one thing he was disappointed in was this ripe bitch sitting in the front row. He'd be turning in his grave if we put him in it yet. But so Richard Welch, he claimed that he'd sent all this information in 11 previous letters, but since he hadn't heard any reply, he assumed that none of them had reached Kit. So after a year of searching, Kit had found her man. She was initially distraught at the thoughts of never seeing him again and tucked to the bed, but then she came up with a plan. And in 1693, she would have been around 26, she cut her hair, dressed in one of Richard's suits, and enlisted in Captain Tichborne's infantry as Christian Welch to go fight for King William III against the French in Flanders.
Wow. Hold on.
She's Mulaning it.
The first film I ever saw in the cinema.
There you go.
This is an incredible level of a jealous bae.
What? She's going to bring her man back.
She's not. She's joining the army to go during what's going to be a 9 years war, just so she can go over, find her fella having sex with some French drag queen.
She's gonna go find him and bring him back, I guess, is the plan. But I get, when you were talking earlier on a bit, like abandoning your children is the done thing at the time. She doesn't really give much consideration to what's going to be done with her kids. She, like, in the book, she says one of them's dead, and she kind of says it in a like, well, at least one of them was dead, so that was easy to take care of. But of the other two, she leaves the baby with a nurse, and then she sends the older one to her mother. And now she's ready to go.
That's pretty good going. I feel like that's not bad in terms of how most Irish people were reared back in the day. Like, being reared by a nurse or your grandmother, there are two options instead of just, like, I sleep in a ditch and sometimes over the hedge there's fellas who talk to each other and teach us things where I hear over earshot. Like, that's...
Yeah, I guess it's not a bad life at these times. But so she goes to leave the country. She's signing up with the regiment. Because of the penal laws at the time, you couldn't bring more than £5 out of the country, which was a rule to stop Catholics fleeing with all their money as the Protestant ascendancy got into power. So she sews a load of cash into her trousers and off she goes.
Nice. Do you think that'll work for me when I'm trying to bring all this money back from America?
I was going to say that to you earlier. You're on a bit like, yeah, how do I get this money back home? Sew it into your pants and walk through security. It worked back in the 1670s and it'll work now. So Kit landed in the Netherlands and then quickly got into the rhythm of marching because, she spent a lot of time around soldiers as a kid. She was soon nicknamed the Pretty Dragoon by her comrades.
Dragon?
No, like a dragoon is, I don't know, some kind of soldier.
Okay.
So Kit's immediately thrown into the deep end of the war. Her first taste of action was the giant Battle of Landen in the Spanish Netherlands, where Louis XIV's 60,000 men narrowly defeated the Dutch, English, Spanish side of 50,000. Kit was shot just above the ankle and wounded enough to take her off the battlefield, but she survived. So this is the same battle where Patrick Sarsfield died from the War of the Two Kings saga. This is where he died.
From Vela's Sarsfield fame.
That's the very one. So is Kit Cavanagh a better soldier than Sarsfield?
Yes.
Yes, probably.
Yes.
I think that's fair to say. She recovers from her wound, unlike Sarsfield, and she's back in action about 2 months later. She spends most of the next year marching back and forth until herself and 59 others were captured by the French in the summer of 94 and marched to Saint-Germain, where King James and co. were living in exile. You love a good man in exile.
I just want to be a man in exile. I don't know why.
It's just cool, you're going rogue. But so she's in French prison for a while, and while she's there, they because King James is there, they separate the Englishmen from the Dutch and Spanish soldiers and kind of try and get them to join up with the French side. But Kit doesn't go for it, and after 9 days anyway, they're all traded in a prisoner exchange, and they're sent back to the front lines. It's now around December of 1694. Kit's been in the army for about a year and a half, and the whole time she's asking after her brother, Richard Walsh. And through this whole thing, no one's realised that she's a woman somehow.
Oh, so they're still,
even though they're
still calling her a Christian, and they don't realise that it's Kit.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
It's like if someone called you, hey, someone saying it's your mother. They're saying that their name is Mary Larney. They're I couldn't put. No, that's not for me. That you've obviously made a mistake here.
She says, check again, but so she's pretending Richard's her brother, and that's who she's asking after. But she's been to prison, and she's been shot and went through surgery, and still no one's figured out that she's a woman.
Yeah, but this is like Albert Cashier, that you're look, in general, men are not the most aware, especially of females, in terms of how many times have you seen a woman get upset because you're I got a new haircut and nobody noticed, and you're for most men you could just change skin color and we're not going to realize. It's I got a new blusher. I don't know what that is. It's it makes my cheeks red. I thought you were just cold. It's windy. It's November.
Wasn't he that rapper from the early 2000s? So, but by her own accounts, Kit's having a grand old time of it in the barracks. She's drinking and eating with the men, playing cards with them, and the big question, I'm sure you're thinking, Jason, she's even pissing alongside them.
And no one's noticing.
Well, she uses a device which is consisted of it's like a silver tube with leather straps that she has, and she's just using that to flute it out, along with the rest of them.
It's some kind of an angled trough or a funnel.
Yeah. Now, my question that wasn't answered in the book, I wonder when she was making it, did she truly get into the mindset of a man in which she's make it a bit bigger? Did she have a tube and she was
It's I don't know.
If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right,
Yeah, and then she makes it a little bit bigger than the average anyway, but then goes, I know people are telling me that that's a good size, but I've actually had access to the internet for the last couple of years, so I've seen quite a lot of videos.
You should see the tubes on there.
Yeah, it's a different level. It's a completely different level, and the top of the tubes is cut off, so they look different than Irish tubes.
Yeah, there was nothing on whether the tube was circumcised or not either, but we're going to have to assume yes. Kit's one of the lads now. There's a weird... Sorry, so this is the first in a series of weird instances where, right, we'll get into it, but she's in Gorkum, and she decides to amuse herself by trying out all the flirting techniques that had been used on her and one of the young local girls. She squeezed her hands, sighs a few times, threw all the lines that had been used on her, and it worked. The young woman fell for Christian Walsh, the handsome young soldier.
Jesus, saucy.
Well, so when I wrote this in the first time, I was like, this is an interesting, weird little quirk. She does this quite a bit. So then, right, she tries to make a move on her, still as a joke. And then
sure it is.
Yeah, and then the woman rebukes her, saying that she loved the soldier, but loved her honor more, which just made Kit more fond of the woman. So a sergeant from a different company also takes a liking to the girl, but when she refuses his advances, in Kit's words, finding that he couldn't take it by regular siege, he resolved to give a desperate assault, sword in hand, which is a very flowery way of saying he tried to rape her.
Yeah, Jesus.
Yeah, so luckily there's some soldiers nearby and they chase him off, and when she recovered, she went to find Kit and told her what happened. So Kit challenges the sergeant to a duel to fight for the girl's honor, and she ends up wounding the sergeant in the process before the fight was broken up. So the sergeant's taken to the hospital tent, and because Kit is a lower ranking officer and is also the instigator, she's thrown in prison. But the girl Kit had defended told her father what had happened, and her dad's a well-off local businessman, so he goes and speaks up for the good soldier Christian Welch, and they listen to him because, he's got money. A businessman.
Yeah, he's got money.
He's got money.
So he must be speaking the truth.
Yeah, exactly. He's a man of means. So 4 days later, Kit is released from prison. So unfortunately, this now means that she's got the girl's undying love. But she managed to rebuke her advances by saying that she was too lowly a rank in the army to marry her.
Wait. What? So Kit was saying that I'm too low in the army to marry you.
Yeah, basically, as opposed to the real reason, which is
I have a vagina. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So from
I wonder if is that why so many girls have broken up with me over the years and never given me a proper reason? That their answer at the end of it is they're just not willing to say it.
I think it's all women are just I'm too lowly a rank to marry you.
No, I think that they're breaking up with me. I think they're breaking up with me just because they have a vagina.
Yeah, I think that's a fair reason. But so this whole thing, leads to her being honorably discharged, because it seems to be she's discharged mostly for her own safety in case the sergeant takes revenge on her. So she's immediately able to re-enlist, and she does so under Lord John Hayes' 2nd Royal North British Dragoons, also known as the Royal Scots Greys.
You mean the famous prop from Ireland, the big John Hayes?
That's exactly the guy. Here he was in 1690, whatever, leading a battalion.
A soldier on the battlefield, a soldier on the rugby field. Cried during the national anthem. What a man.
A true patriot. Which one, though? The Dutch national anthem.
Oh, I imagine that fucking terrible one by Phil Coulter.
Oh, the All-Ireland one.
Yeah. Which is, in general, Phil Coulter's never wrote a good song in his life, and now we're going to try and let him have let him have a national anthem. What? And it's going to be, don't get me started.
That'll be the Ireland national anthem when we finally get unified. But so she rejoins the army, and she's back in the action again, taking part in the Grand Allegiance's successful Siege of Namur in the summer of 1695.
That's what it was called when PSG bought him from Barcelona.
There you go. So a few weeks later, there was another incident involving a woman's honour when Kit went with some of her comrades to a house of civil recreation, which is a brothel.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why didn't they call it a house of disrepute?
I don't know. This was just the European term for it, I guess. We were dealing with houses of disrepute. The other lads, her other comrades that she went, they went off, and she sat in the front room entertaining herself on the piano. While she was there, one of the pregnant prostitutes kicked up a fuss, swearing that one of the soldiers was the father of her unborn child.
What do you mean? Oh, sorry, I was going to go off on one there for a second before I caught it. I'm like, what do you mean one of the pregnant prostitutes? Why are there pregnant prostitutes hanging around? And they're like, they're professional prostitutes before the time of condoms. I imagine it's quite...
Yeah, exactly, yeah. It's quite a common thing.
Yeah, most of the time back then you're having sex with a prostitute. She's probably a pregnant prostitute.
Yeah, but I imagine this is also a common thing as well. She starts kicking up a fuss that one of the soldiers is the father of her child. The only issue was that she swears that Kit is the father of her child.
Well, I was going to say it'd be like one of the few times it's acceptable for the man to, having been told that you're the father of the child, been like, are you sure it's mine?
Yeah, this is...
How dare you? How dare you?
Yeah.
I have only slept with 78 men this week.
So apparently she tried to get some business out of Kit, but when Kit sent her away, she decided to get her revenge by claiming that she was the father of her unborn child. But rather than blow her cover and admit that, she was a woman, Christian Walsh reluctantly admitted that he was the father of the child and gave the woman some money for him.
Oh, what a...
Well, it's either that or blow her cover, and also it kind of lends credence to her cover because all the men now know that she's fathered the child. It kind of spreads around the camp, and it reinforces her disguise. And also in the book, she kind of talks about, she says that the child dies within a month, which she seems like pretty happy with. Like, not overtly happy, but like, it's convenient.
But like the level of happy that a mother would be when they're also the type of person to abandon two of their children just to go find their ex who's ran away from them.
Yeah, exactly. She's just sort of... See, this is a really interesting story with a strong, empowered female, and it would work really well in our modern climate. Like, this would make a great film, a great feminist film, if you ignored all the parts where she really does not seem to give a shit about children, and there's a lot of dead kids in the story.
Yeah, sounds like we're
kid number 7.
We're going down the Plunkett route.
We are, yes. I mean, this is the 1600s, I guess, but yes. So Kit travelled around Europe as a dragoon with the Scots Greys until the Treaty of Ryswick ended the 9 Years' War in the autumn of 1697. She got passage with the army back to Dublin, none the closer to finding her Richard. She inquired after her mother and children and found that they were well, and she managed to talk to them, but she was so different in her dress and fatigue that they didn't recognise her, and for some reason she just decides to stay incognito. She doesn't tell them who she is.
Yeah. Okay, that's obvious. Something's gone on here. Like, this is not is this a trans woman? Because that wasn't a thing 100 years ago. They're just like, so she decides randomly to come home and then tell everyone that she's been living with before that she's a different gender now, that she now associates as a different person. So is that just history being proved, like transitioning was always a thing and we just haven't referenced it till now?
This is different than Cashier. I would say she's certainly bisexual, but she does, like, you'll see as the story goes on, it's not the same situation as Cashier. Like, Cashier definitely identified as a man based on how he lived his life after he left the war. So it's a different story with Kit Cavanagh, but just based on the amount of times that, like, she'll, as a joke, crack on to women, I assume she was at least bisexual and just wasn't acceptable.
That's kind of like, the quintessentially over dramatic homophobic dudes on your football team when you're younger often turn out to be gay in real life. Like, it's kind of like that. It's like, is that what's happening?
Yeah, it's one of those weird tropes of life where the people who are the most outwardly homophobic often turn out to be gay.
Yeah.
I had the same situation with this, like, arachnophobe I met recently. I met this guy, massive arachnophobe, and sure enough, he was gay.
I thought you were going to say he was in the US Army circa 2001 to 2012.
Well, that's why George Bush invaded the Middle East. He hated spiders. So, but this is not to do with her sexuality. I don't know what this is. She just, like, decides to not reveal herself to her family. I don't know. She's got some other stuff going on. Now, like, maybe it's a case of PTSD. I don't know. She feels like she can't go back to her normal life. She gets a job in Dublin to keep herself afloat. She's pretty much given up on Richard at this stage. But then, in October of the year 1700, so about 3 years later, the King of Spain, Charles II, a.k.a. El Hechizado.
You sound
the Bewitched.
like, to reference it again, you trying to pronounce that sounds like Sean Connery trying to pretend to be a Spanish matador in Highlander.
I'm nailing it, but so El Hechizado, he dies, and then the Spanish War of Secession begins. Charles was a member of the Habsburg family, who was riddled with health problems because of all the inbreeding that they did.
Because you know what the world's like, Kevin. You've got your Habsburg and you've got your Habsburg knots.
That's exactly it, Jason. So the Habsburgs were against the Habsburg knots. He died at 38 without an heir. So the Spanish Empire at this stage was in decline, but it still had a serious landmass across the world. They owned like a lot of Southern and Central America. They had land all across North America. Obviously Spain in Europe, and then also the Spanish Netherlands, and they owned pretty much all of southern Italy. And the other leaders of Europe wanted to start breaking up the Spanish Empire, but in his will, Charles left his kingdom to Philippe of Anjou from the House Bourbon, who was the grandson of Louis XIV, aka the Sun King. So these are the two of the biggest houses in Europe, the Habsburgs and the Bourbons. And the 9 Years' War and this war, like, they're all based around not letting any one family get too much power. Because they're all intermarrying. All the heads of all these countries are cousins. But they're worried about any one country controlling too much stuff at one time. So he leaves it to Philip of Anjou. But if Philippe becomes the King of Spain, that means that between himself and his grandfather Louis, they own more than half of Europe. They're too powerful. So Leopold I, who's a Habsburg, he says, my son Karl, he can be King of Spain. And to show that he's serious about it, he changes his son's name from Karl to Carlos.
Not Carlito.
Not Carlito. He says, my son's now called Carlos. And the old enemies are back at it again. So the Grand Alliance, which we talked about in the William James episodes, that's like the Dutch, the English, the Holy Roman Empire, they all get together to try and get Carlos onto the throne and fight against the French and the Spanish. And so starts the War of the Spanish Succession, and Kit figures she's got nothing going on for her in Dublin, and, you know, maybe Richard's still out there. So in 1701, she hops on a ship to Holland and enlists with her old regiment under the command of Lord John Hayes. She's back at it again. Mulan 2, Return of the Dragon, or whatever the hell that was.
What's the new Mulan one called? Is that the second one? Is this Mulan new movie, is it a sequel or is it just a reimagining?
I think it's a reimagining. I think it's called Mulan, Taiwan's Not a Real Country.
Let's not. This is going to be a long podcast. Let's not get into the socioeconomic politics of Taiwan.
We don't have time for that. So I don't know if she is trying to find her husband or if she just wants to get back in the action, but she's back anyway. So as we covered in the previous episode, in March of 1702, King William III dies after he falls off his horse, and the British Army moves under the control of the Duke of Marlborough,
and what does everyone?
John Churchill.
What does everyone tell him, Kev? When you fall off the horse, get back onto the horse. Oh no, he's dead. He's dead.
It might be also the origin of the phrase "making a mountain out of a molehill." Possibly. But so you know, John Churchill. We covered this before. He helped betray James II when he invited William over to take the English throne. At this stage, he'd lost favour with William and Mary because he kept writing letters to James asking for his forgiveness, but also because he kind of wanted to play both sides. So he'd fuck James over, and then he's like, James, sorry about how things went down. Just so you know, if you ever do stage a successful rebellion and come back, I'm here for you. Of course, not in any, substantial or financial way or publicly, but if you do win, remember your old friend John Churchill. So after William and Mary die, Mary's sister Anne becomes queen. Anne is good friends with Churchill's wife Sarah, so he's back in the game, and he's the Captain General of Queen Anne's armies at home and abroad.
What?
So he's back into it again. I think he's the head of the whole army.
Yeah.
At home and away. He's got syndication rights to the show. So Winston Churchill, he was an amateur historian, and he wrote a lot about this is his great whatever grandfather.
Do you mean, Kevin, by amateur historian, giant racist?
That seems a bit right, but
the type of man who would have a concentration camp in Ethiopia that would held up to 45,000 people while going to war with Hitler.
Yeah, that's the man.
Yeah,
but so he tries to rewrite, or he tries to talk about how what John Churchill did, betraying everyone around him and playing all sides to make sure that he came out on top. He tries to play it off as being a top British patriot, as opposed to a scumbag, self-serving son of a bitch.
British patriot.
Yes. Christian Walsh was back on the ground. In July of 1704, she was wounded again, this time getting a musket ball lodged in her hip above the upper thigh at the Battle of Schulenburg in Bavaria. She was carried off the battlefield to a nearby hospital for surgery, but once again managed to get by without her gender being discovered.
How bad are doctors back then?
It's getting closer. The first shot's in her ankle, and now it's in her thigh. Surely...
Yeah, but... Or do they just turn her... would you put it beyond the medical professionals at the time? You could just turn around and be like, wait, you don't seem to have a penis. It was blown off in the war.
Yeah, just let's just not talk about it.
Yeah, but
if I have to have one more conversation today telling a man his penis has been blown off, I can't. Not before lunch. Send him off. Give him a sticker and a lollipop.
This one was shot so badly it became a vagina.
Yeah. She didn't let her injury slow her down, though. She fought with the Scots Greys at the Battle of Blenheim a couple of weeks later in August. After the battle, she was assigned to guard some French prisoners, and they marched them back to their camp in Breda. I guess there was a lot of wives of the soldiers living there, because she was commenting on how there was both women wailing at the loss of their husbands and lovers, and then women fondly greeting their men coming back from war. She was watching one Dutch woman with joy in her face, caressing a soldier from another regiment, and it put her in mind of her own love, Richard, her husband from 12 years ago. Then she looked at him closer and realised that is Richard. There he is.
Oh, God.
13 years later, she said she felt immediately divided between rage and love, resentment and compassion. And we're going to leave it on that cliffhanger for this week. Next week's episode will finish off the story of Kit Cavanagh. What happened when she met Richard? Who is this other woman? And there's still a whole war to be fought. Who won that? It's still anyone's game. So we'll chat to you next week for part 2 of the Kit Cavanagh story. Good luck.